Good morning, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to another Everflow Fireside Chat. Today, I am joined by Azad, who is the CEO of Sprint Logistics. And logistics, as we may or may not know, is the secret superpower, I think, behind the growth in the last sort of 50 years. We take it for granted that you can just click something and then it appears. But there's a whole series behind that, a whole series of companies and processes that have developed. And Azam and his team at Sprint Logistics are really the architecture to deliver this experience that we all enjoy as consumers. So Azam has kindly joined us today to share his knowledge and some insights on this. Thanks very much for joining us. And I'm pronouncing your name right. Is that right, Azad?
Azad, yeah, perfect.
Azad, perfect. Cool. Great. Well, before we kind of get into it, it'd be great just to hear a little bit about like your story, like your journey. People are always interested in the people behind the people, right? How did you start in this? How did you get involved? And how did Sprint Logistics come into being?
Yeah. Well, I always wanted to do my own business. So I started off life as an investment banker for 7 years at Morgan Stanley, following my degree at Cambridge. And then I worked for a telecom and media company, at which I built it up, now known as Virgin Media. So I was Group MD of a company in the UK. It was fashioned on the US cable businesses. So we fashioned ourselves on a couple of famous businesses in the US called Cox Communications or Comcast. So we were pioneering new services at a time when they were quite different for the marketplace. Now they're common, but at the time they were new. And yeah, we had a fun time. I was young, gregarious. I tried to maintain both, but the reality came all the time. And then I wanted to do my own thing. And so in 2005, I left and bought a small business called Transworld, which was a courier business, actually, last mile deliveries. And from there, we kind of I got very interested in this thing called warehousing and logistics and this thing called the internet and e-commerce. This is around 2009, 2010, 2011. Started getting interested in what's going on with people buying things on the internet, because having done a lot of internet at the utility level for Virgin Media, having built the plumbing that you call broadband, I was fascinated by the impact that would have on shopping behavior. And where I was in the last mile business, I thought, that's a scale business. You have to be a monster like DPD. But maybe within the fulfillment and logistics space, it'd be a place to be. So that's how I re-engineered and reimagined the business to be what we are today.
Well, I mean, obviously you're going to agree with me, right? With being a logistics guy, but people just, I think it really is a superpower. That's how we got into this whole fireside chat, right? People take it for granted, don't they? That, you can click on a button and something appears the next day. And there's a lot of work that goes in behind that. So the first kind of question that we kind of shaped out is like, what actually happens from click to delivery? There's a lot there, right? How does, how, typically within an e-commerce environment, sketch it out for someone that really doesn't know, what happens?
Yeah, well, I mean, lots of things happen, but in summary, it's our clients or our clients' clients, and therefore our clients. Everyone's a busy human being, so they just want it all to flow. We're a flow business, right? We're in the business of making things flow from point A to point B. So our mission statement as a business is we love making e-commerce flow. So try to keep that statement in your mind when I talk about examples, but we make things flow. That's what it's all about. And you might say, well, that's interesting. Isn't that by definition, isn't that what happens? And I'll say it does, except life is full of bottlenecks. Geographies are full of bottlenecks. Streets are full of bottlenecks. Regions are full of bottlenecks. And so a good logistics company can find a way of working through bottlenecks. Products can have bottlenecks. So our job really is to make things, as you said, pretty much just flow. So it's a very broad question that you ask. But our primary goal, in its most simple sense, is to make things go from A to B. So in our world, when a user completes a purchase online, it to us triggers a data transfer to us. That data transfer itself, I could spend hours talking about data transfers, but I won't. With all the necessary details to allow us to pick the order, check it, pack it, and then ship to final destination. Then, of course, what you want if you're a consumer is you just want a nice, simple tracking information that allows you to kind of keep on top of the fact that the item's being shipped to you. Sometimes you want that information pushed to you, but you can turn that off, right? Your merchant site can allow you to, if you're a big buyer of things from a particular Shopify site or an Amazon site, you can say, you know what, I don't want to have my inbox bombarded with tracking information. So I'll jump into the site and see how my purchase is done at my own interest, but I don't want my inbox clogged up with that kind of information. Now that sounds pretty straightforward when I just described it. It's so simply you receive an order, you check it, you pick it, you pack it, and you send it to the final destination. But let me just break down that a little bit. There are different products, different packages. They need different pick methods and different shipping solutions. So we've just started shipping carbonated gas. If anyone's old on this call, they'll know there used to be a product in this country called SodaStream. And so that's like carbonated water, fizzy water, and you just put flavors in it. That's making a bit of a comeback. Now, we have to work extensively with all our carriers. We have about 7 or 8 carriers that come to our facilities every day. Only one of them agreed to carry this product because it's semi-hazardous, carbonated water. We ship blades, shaving blades, right? Again, when you're shipping blades of that nature, you got to pack them, and you got to have the tick in the box for the kind of packaging which goes safely for carrying those kind of blades. So now you're into the understanding all these nuances. If you ship items which have an electrical component to them, a battery, you have to have an ability to prove that the product won't accidentally turn itself on while it's being shipped. Yeah. So that's all about, and if you get those wrong, it won't get shipped, meaning you might wing it for a while, but when someone in that supply chain that's trying to make things flow figures out that you've broken their compliance, they'll suspend your shipping. And so suddenly you're not making e-commerce flow. You've hit a dead stop. Yeah. So what can sound quite simple, as you start peeling back point by point by point, it starts getting complicated. And if I can now just step back on another world, I talked a little bit there about shipping, didn't I? About moving things from A to B. Well, that's for our clients. But now
the end user, as it were.
Now how about our actual clients, people that pay our wages? Well, they're a bit more interested in how things work, the journey. So, for example, they have inbound freight coming in from wherever they're manufacturing the goods. And if they choose my business to help them bring those products in, they want updates about where are their containers, where's their air freight, where's their sea freight. Now, that isn't with the consumer, that's with our actual merchant, isn't it? Then clearing of it, then arrival at our warehouse, notification that the stock has arrived, booking it in, highlighting any issues with the stock, putting it away, inventory counts. What about if you need to capture serial numbers, or you need to catch, if you're doing food or drinks, batch numbers, right? What if you're doing what we call FIFO picking? FIFO picking normally is first product in, first product out. So the oldest stuff gets rotated. But you know now that many businesses are going from D2C to now B2B. And in the B2B world, when you're selling to a retailer, sometimes a retailer will say, my product has to have a minimum 1 year life of the shelf. So if you've got a warehouse full of product that's normally being shipped first in, first out, what if a retailer says, but it has to have minimum 1 year life? So you need to have a system that can flip the switch and ensure that when that order comes in from that big retailer, and these are big orders, right? They're pallets of stock. You don't accidentally follow the wrong rules and you send them product that only has 6 months shelf life left. So now you're into a world of collecting all that data and ensuring that when those that information comes in, your systems and your processes can break it all up and allow your operation to operate and get those things out. So shipping updates, Amazon Prime has their own SLAs that you have to meet. So in the background, if you fail those SLAs, you lose your Prime badge. And let's describe who the you is when I say you. Amazon doesn't work with 3PLs like myself. They work with merchants. But a merchant can outsource their fulfillment to a 3PL like myself. I'm now acting as if I'm the merchant as far as the fulfillment's concerned. So if I fail that SLA, my merchant, my actual client who pays my bills, is the one who's going to get punished.
Wow.
So it's very important that we operate within the SLAs. We've learned through our experience now that you can actually set the parameters within Amazon Prime to give us half a chance of succeeding along those SLAs. But that's come through lots of trial and error and special access that we now have with people at Amazon that allow us to set the settings so we fulfill the Prime criteria. Whereas if you go in there cold, you might lose your badge very quickly. It's important because Amazon has been raising their prices for their own fulfillment services, and some clients are now saying, could you do Prime for us? Because it's quite expensive for us to go back and forth from Amazon warehouses. Right, by the way, you've got product that's temperature sensitive, and you have to regulate it between, if you're in the dietary world, sometimes you've got dietary products that have to be kept with, say, between 10 and 17 degrees, and you have to prove that they've been kept at that temperature.
Wow.
Right. So then you mentioned, the touch points and data capture. We have to have parts of our business where we're constantly monitoring the temperature in that part of the warehouse, ensuring that it complies to the requirement. So that's a lot of stuff that's the end person who's just hit click to buy will be completely oblivious to, right?
Yeah.
But for that product to end up at their, in their hands, I've just mentioned at a high level quite a lot of things that have to go into the thinking behind it.
Yeah. So you mentioned a couple of things there. Obviously, like the compliance, the SLA. You can maybe come on to a little bit expanding on maybe like the technology. But one thing that fascinates me about the logistic industry is like you'd be hard pressed to find a more international industry, right? So I guess with your experience of consulting and that kind of very big picture stuff that you were doing in your consultancy practice, just for a layman like me to lay out like the logistics, I assume, maybe rightly or wrongly, that a lot of product comes from, let's say, China, comes into historical ports like in the UK, like Harwich or something like that, and then gets moved to distribution centers in different parts of the country like Birmingham, where it could be reached sort of across other countries. Like, first of all, is that right? And can you expand on that? Like, what actually happens when, like a product is, let's say, ships from China, it comes on that crate, comes into a port. What happens then?
Yeah, well, that itself has been something which, in theory, it gets cleared. Let's dumb it down to that most basic.
Yeah,
level. The most basic level, yes, it arrives on port, paperwork's cleared, it gets cleared. That means any local taxes that have to be paid are paid upon entry. And then it's cleared to be delivered to a warehouse. And if we pick your example of a warehouse in Birmingham, they'll be sent to their warehouse in Birmingham, then it's effectively onboarded, meaning the container is opened or whatever, if that's the mode of transport, and then it'll be handballed into and put into what's called a goods in process. Now, you raise a good you raise a good generic example because anyone who reads the newspaper, especially the business sections, will have seen in the last few years there's been bottlenecks in every area you just mentioned. So you mentioned the port, right? The ports have been bottlenecked. They're not bottlenecked right now in some parts of the world. They're okay now, but you would imagine that during COVID and post-COVID, there was enormous bottlenecks, too much containers in too many ports, and so things were getting delayed.
How did you guys overcome those kind of problems?
With lots of planning. I would say there's no easy answer on that front. So what we tended to do with clients in those particular unique situations was we would have, if possible, some stock sent by air, and some sent by ship. And then the stuff would just work its way through to us. But it was challenging, for several clients. And then, of course, you got to have then when that happens, let's suppose you've got an amount of timeline. This is this long, and this supposedly this much was meant to be taken by that part of the journey, and this much for the rest. But this part, which is the freight and the clearing, ended up taking this long. The kind of option then you can offer a client is, well, why don't we rapidly do a drop ship? So if you've got 600 back orders, why don't we instantly fulfill 600 orders rather than? And so our technology, which we built ourselves, allows us to flick a switch and deal with instantaneous fulfillment of back orders. So if something's been delayed at port, rather than going through a classic onboarding process, which, by the way, let's suppose your stock is going to an Amazon warehouse. There is no such option. It will have to go through their goods in onboarding process to end up on a shelf to be picked and then shipped. Once it's there, it's picked and shipped very quickly, by the way. But it might be stuck in a goods in process for a week. And if you've got one of the number one issues for many e-commerce merchants is order cancellation, right? You've built your marketing, you've built your products, you've got the order, you've got the sale, and then it cancels because the product's not being fulfilled. So yeah, you want to make the e-commerce flow. So you've got to be quick.
And this is a great segue into the next question. So a lot of people watching this are going to be shop owners of some sort, right? Everflow, obviously, we're a tracking platform. We deal with about 940 different clients across a range of industries. Many of those are e-commerce clients. What can you advise an owner of an e-commerce business, ways in which they can help optimize the whole customer satisfaction and this whole kind of logistic journey that needs to take place in the messages that they give to their potential consumers to ensure that, I guess, consumers are happy and fulfilled, and also that it's competitive with other people in the landscape, right? Because people are going to be shipping fast, and that is a measure of satisfaction, right? So what kind of tips could you offer people that own their own stores?
Yeah, so very, very, very good point. I mean, I haven't got a magic formula, but I would say a few things. With logistics, the devil tends to be in the detail. So I would say be nimble. Try to think about quality of service. In my experience, clients spend a lot of time at any level thinking on price, but they only buy again if they're happy with the service. And that can go for merchants as well, right? Only the buying experience is a great experience. It's an emotional purchase. Everything is emotional. There's always a degree of emotion involved in buying anything. But repeat purchase is the rationality kicks in. Did I actually like it? Did I enjoy it? So I would say accurate views about how long delivery is going to take. Accurate product descriptions, right? Good packaging. Who likes? I don't know if you've ever bought stuff and you get a very tardy, chewed up box or a chewed up courier bag. It's not a good image. It's definitely not a good image, and it's definitely a low quality image, and it puts you down the value chain. These kind of things are quite important. I would say in the current world, you got to get the balance right between keeping your stock in one place, so therefore you can manage your working capital, but also trying to be close to the customer. So if you're trying to manage European sales, but holding all your stock in a warehouse in the United States, that might be good for working capital by having all your stock in that warehouse in the United States, but it's quite expensive actually for shipping and also transit times as well. So in those worlds, you got to be thinking, well, I want to be closer to my end customer. And so can I find somebody that can do that? I'd say if you're running your own business, pay attention to non-moving stock and find a way to rotate it and getting your money turning again. That's very, so you really got to pay attention to all the levers of a business is how I talk to my customers. So their customer experience in terms of a good product description, nice, slick checkout process, fast fulfillment, that's great from the customer perspective, but But in terms of running their own business, though, pay good attention to their total cost of logistics, to their total cost of marketing. Is there enough margin left over to actually run a business successfully? And then if there are, some of those points are a bit high, what can they re-engineer whilst keeping the service quality positive?
I think those are great points, actually, because it's very tempting as a shop owner, e-store owner, to sort of think, okay, I know you guys are sorting out the fulfillment. And so when that conversion has come through, I'm happy now. The customer's going to be happy. But like you said, actually, the journey hasn't really even begun for the customer. The emotional experience, until they actually receive, open that package, look at it and realize, okay, this is good value, I'm going to reorder again. What would you say? Do you have much experience in terms of offering advice on subscription? Is obviously a big one, right? Any repeat purchase, this is where the money can be lost or made for e-commerce clients, right? Upsells and subscriptions and things like that. Is there any advice that you can do with regards to that, or is there any strategies that you see regularly in use across the sort of logistical spectrum of subscription renewals and so on?
I think you just want a reliable, from a fulfillment perspective, you want a very reliable provider, tight on their SLAs and SOPs. And I'll get to what I mean by those statements at some point in our chat. But the key thing would be just steady Eddie on that front, on the subscription side, and make it a good experience. You do want to have good packaging. It's got to look like something you'd want to receive on a regular basis. And that's really all I say about this. We do about 4 or 5 different subscription types. Some clients try varieties, so they'll throw in a messaging nowadays, or they'll throw in a sample of something else as well. They'll experiment with that. We're seeing a bit of that. Company we've partnered with is pioneering digital messaging app, print messaging that goes with the actual fulfillment. So when an order happens, a dedicated piece of marketing collateral is printed at the point of fulfillment with the subscription service that goes in the package when it gets delivered. And the rate of response to that touch point is very high. Because I think when you think about subscription, if it becomes a bit habitual, unless it's an absolute necessity, it might get cancelled.
Mm-hmm.
And so you want to keep customer engagement. So I would say the best way to keep your subscription numbers high is to keep innovating that customer experience. Whether that's an insert, whether that's a sample, whether that's a new message, keep the customer engagement going.
Mm.
You know, we're in a cost of living crisis. What gets cancelled? Subscriptions.
Yeah, absolutely. And from that kind of point of innovation, what sort of dealings and what are the touch points within your ecosystem of like other e-commerce companies? And what sort of new technology do you see sort of emerging at the moment?
Yeah. In terms of partnerships, or in terms of what kind of technology we've seen coming on that's a sideways to us, a kind of a nice add-on to what we do, or a nice partnership in terms of what we do. Kind of things I've seen are, I gave one example there about some kind of a not a generic flyer, but a dedicated flyer.
Mm-hmm.
But I've also now started seeing, we've also got partnerships with people that help with tax clearance, because you're doing cross-border. Europe's become complicated. Now, we are not a tax company, but we're integrated into partners that can help people with their tax calculations for jurisdictions. Or with cross-border shipments, you need to provide certain information. So we're integrated into partners that collect all this information. But anyone wants to know, it's called IOSS. So that allows smooth shipment of goods cross-border. So I think those are the key areas. One was about personalization of that experience to do with print. One was to do with companies that can help you do your tax returns by jurisdictions. And then the other one was to do all clearing as well. Sometimes when you're trying to get product into this country or into this region, you need to get your registration done properly. We've got good partners, companies that help us do that for our clients. And then the other one I mentioned was just free flowing of shipping through the borders. That's what I've seen externally. Obviously, for ourselves, within our own business, which is a fulfillment business, there is lots of technology and there's lots of development going on that I'm happy to talk about.
One thing that we've seen, just in a very small way, obviously as a tracking platform, Everflow allows you to create things like QR codes, which we see people including now in stock that they send out to their consumers, like member get member or refer a friend to get 10% off or something like that. What are some of the technology features that you've been investing in as a business within Sprint?
Yeah, I mean, the main technology investment we've done, and it's now running into a couple of £1 million actually, is we built our own warehouse management system. And we got there through a voyage of discovery, thinking that perhaps we could go and buy external platforms. A bit like your system, really. In the end, Everflow hangs off a very powerful system that was built by itself because nothing else was quite out there that did what it does. So from our perspective, our system Bolt, it's integrated now with hundreds of customers and with dozens of complex platforms. But it's taken a decade to perfect. But it's designed from the ground up for direct to consumer, business to consumer, business to business to consumer, and business to business requirements. And we've got feature sets that are quite unique and adaptable. I'll give you an example. And so I'm going really into WMS, but we're going to step back and talk outside WMS in a second. But within WMS, we've got...
WMS stands for what, sorry, again?
Warehouse Management System.
Got it.
Imagine, Zach, you're a company that's a electronics company.
Yeah.
And you're manufacturing product that's reasonably expensive, £90 to £100 ticket value, but it has a warranty. Because most electronic items have a warranty, right?
Wi-Fi extender's a good one, right? Since COVID, lots of those are being sold. People working at home, yeah.
Yeah. So these things have warranties, don't they? Right. So much of what gets sold in the e-com space doesn't really have a warranty. So if you buy dietary products, there's no warranty. The worry more there is batch control, right? But there's certainly no warranty. Whereas if you're doing electronics, especially if they have active electronics within them, even passive, but let's say an active element, there's a chance they're going to fail. So there's always a warranty element. Our systems have now been built to allow serial number capture when it comes off the container in a master carton. So nowadays, you talked about QR codes. So nowadays, they can design QR codes and you scan one code and it will have the serial number of the 30 boxes inside. That will instantly populate our systems as to the serial numbers that are within that master box.
Awesome.
That's not off the shelf, but that's a great feature to have because when you're going for, in our perspective, working for those higher value added clients, and we're kind of a mid-sized 3PL, third-party logistics company, can you have that capability out of the box? In our case, pardon the pun, but it is out of the box. So when you scan that box, the serial numbers get auto-populated and right there and then, and that's good for that moment in time. Now, when it gets picked and shipped, you've now got a record because when that little box, one of the 30 gets scanned, you know the serial number already. You haven't had to have somebody manually scan every single serial number, which of course is inefficient. It takes time. It costs money. So all that is an example of a simple little feature and capability that we put inside our warehouse management system. And that's the plumbing of our business. That drives our entire business. And we've not found a system like it. As I said, in fact, we just won an award for it. It's called the Innovate UK grant. And we just won an award for it. And we're I'm looking to over time. I call that ground zero. That system that I'm so excited about, I still think is at ground zero. And I'm hoping going forward, we're going to start integrating some artificial intelligence within it, and also a bit of robotics, which I'll be happy to talk more about.
Yeah. Well, I guess that leads us to like the final question, I guess, is like, it's a big point, but what is the future of the logistics industry? I mean, is it, obviously we've got AI, 3D printing, maybe a kind of more distributed logistical system if people can print themselves and sell to consumers, as this sort of the whole rise of micro influencers and much more less about sort of corporate things? Or is it going to be a continuation of bigger companies getting bigger? What do you see as like the coming trends for the logistic industry in the next 5 to 10 years or so?
I can certainly talk about how I see things for us. I think the industry is a huge place. It's a multi-billion-dollar, if not trillion-dollar industry. It has so many dimensions to it. Within our space, Zach, a few things. First of all, I think that there's a lot of work to do with customer reporting and giving customer access to data of what's in their warehouse. I think there's a lot of work that can be done there. Of course, you have to have the data to begin with to then turn it into something usable to give to clients. But I'd like a world where you can log into your smartphone as one of our clients and get to see a very, very fast live snapshot of what's going on in your world with us. That would be a fantastic customer experience, which I've already got the roadmap on. We've found the right solutions, and that's something which is good. That'll be when we do that, we'll be best in class. Then, to me, a bit of robotics. Robotics is an interesting one. It's a very generic word. You'll see term robots being thrown around loosely. We're not a gigantic company, but I can certainly see us stepping into elements of robotics for core elements of our business. So, for example, I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. Every day we do about 5,000 orders. That's our business. We do about 5,000 orders a day through 12 different carriers. Those orders, Zach, have to be arranged by carrier because the carriers come at a certain time to pick up those shipments, and so they have to be ready for them to be, to put onto their trucks, and off they go. So there's a sortation exercise that has to happen. Traditionally, that kind of sortation only sits in warehouses that are the size of football fields, gigantic, and so they don't really offer much to a company like us. And therefore, by implication, to our client base, because our client base, they're not people that are so big. They're nice challenger brands. I want to get to that in a second, actually. I would like to talk about the kind of customers we love working with. But the robotics that we're now seeing will do some of that sortation in a very small space and on a very automated basis, which will allow us to scale up with our clients much faster. It will keep us efficient. It will allow us to work longer hours in terms of around the clock, and allow us, in other words, take that 5,000 orders a day to 10,000 orders a day, and allow us to do that sortation really, really quickly without having a gigantic football field style warehouse where you have these giant conveyor belts and stuff like that.
Yeah, and kind of dormant products there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
No, if I could, and that's because this is important because obviously lots of people are listening to this. We're all about challenger brands, really. I wanted to give, because we didn't talk about that. So for example, we pioneered a company called Bulls, who are a competitor to Manscaped.
Okay.
Yeah, and we are the fulfillment business for a company called Miele, who are a competitor to Dyson. And we are the fulfillment business for Y Foods, who are a competitor to Huel. Huel is a drink, a meal replacement drink. So I've just given 3 examples there. But we have more. We're really good at working with people, entrepreneurs who want to make a difference. They want to challenge the status quo and create something that's really, really interesting. That's what Sprint's all about.
I can't think of a better way to end on. If you're helping people kind of get from 0 to 1 and helping people disrupt, that's a fun journey to be on in every sense of the word, right? From click to conversion, it's the journey to be on. So thanks very much for joining with us. If people want to get hold of you or find out more about your business, where can they go to find information?
So if they go to our website, which is sprintlogistics.com, sprintlogistics.com. There's plenty on there. We're obviously on LinkedIn as well. And on Sprint, you'll see contact details for a generic one, but also if you go into the team, you'll see all the team that you need to contact to kind of learn more. And we're very, very friendly. We're very friendly to the touch. So I'd love to hear from people.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thanks again for your time. I appreciate it, and look forward to speaking to you guys soon and seeing you grow and help your clients grow.
That's great. Thank you so much for inviting Sprint on behalf of all of us. It was a pleasure.
Likewise.